Hey, welcome to the channel where I show you how to put some prep in your step. Today, I'm going to walk you through how I created my YouTube dashboard. This dashboard pulls data from my YouTube channel using the YouTube API, runs through Tableau prep to combine some of the sources to do some transformation, and gives me my dashboard, which just, some of the basic metrics that are coming out, but I just wanted to visualize it in a different way and also be able to kind of customize the view to my own liking. The YouTube app, if you create YouTube videos, gives you your own analytics and tracks all of these things. But, I wanted to see how I could gather that data and then, eventually expand on it and really just tailor it to what I wanted to look at when I'm kind of checking out my channel. So let's jump into it. So if you haven't seen the dashboard, here it is. And you've just got, these are the standard views that, or some of the standard metrics that YouTube already tracks. I wanted to just create something that was a little bit more customized. I wanted to see how I could pull and extract that data. I wanted to work with APIs. I wanted to work with Python. I wanted to work with the scripting step in prep. And so this project really allowed me to really explore some new territory. And I was even able to use the Tab CSS extension from Rody Zakovic. So I will post some links to like the tutorial on how to get the gradient effect to Tab CSS. And so that way you can check those out. But yeah, so it's just got some basic metrics here. It shows the change versus the previous period. One of the really cool things, since I used prep and I used my curvy bump chart prep template, I'm able to change the metric here and it will change the bump chart as well to go with that metric. So really nice. And then if I click a category, it'll filter down to that specific category. But then if I click a video, I'll click this one, it'll actually filter down to that one. And then when I unclick it, that same video will stay highlighted throughout the bump chart. So yeah, like I said, I wanted to be able to customize that, and maybe in the future, as I work with the API a little bit more, I can add some more detail like the demographics and popular regions and things like that. But yeah, so there's a lot of detail that went into this, a lot of steps. So here in this video, we're going to focus on the YouTube API, the Google Developer Platform, and then take a look at some of the Python that I used to extract the data. And then probably in the next video, we'll get into the Tableau prep flow, the scripting step, and show how all of that works. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to set up a profile with the Google Developers Platform. This is going to allow you to access, you can access any of these APIs, but specifically it'll allow you to access the YouTube API. So go in and create your profile, and then you'll be able to access this console. This is the API console. And right now, what you'll have to do is you'll have to create a project. So here, my YouTube dashboard, this is my project, right? And I created another one because I was trying to test it out. But yeah, so you'll create a project. You'll give it a name. Mine was that YouTube dashboard. And then you'll create that. So here you can see in my project, these are some of the APIs I have enabled. I don't use all of them. I was just kind of playing around, seeing what there was, how I could access them. But really, I'm using this YouTube data API, the reporting API, and the analytics API I touch a little bit, but mostly this data API. And if you go to library here, this is where you can actually search for the APIs that you want to use. So you will have to enable the ones you want to use. So if you search in YouTube, then you can see those 3 APIs. And I would just go ahead and use all of them because they allow different kinds of information. So if you look at the data API, you can see videos and channels. You look at the analytics API, that pulls the actual analytics, your views and your subscribers and your things like that. And then the reporting API is something that you can use to set up reporting jobs that you would use to sort of automate and tailor the reporting to your needs. But for me, if I actually go to my enabled services, like I said, I use that data API and then the analytics API. And so again, you'll have to enable those services for you to get the actual secret, your client secret, your API key, and all of that. Now, if I go to my credentials here, now you can see that I've got, there's my API key. I've got my, you have to go in and you have to create your API key, and you have to create your client ID. So make sure that you have all of that. And actually, when you create your credentials, then it'll give you this ability to download your credentials file. So for the YouTube API, you'll want to check out the documentation that they have. So if you see developers.google.com/YouTube, there is the YouTube data API and the analytics and reporting API. So if I were to go to reference in here, for example, I can read all the documentation through. So I would use the channels API. So going in here, it gives you an overview of what is my output going to look like. It's going to come in JSON. So the code that I use kind of goes through and extracts some of these parameters, like the title. Same for the videos. So if I come here to videos, go to the overview, this will show you some of the different parameters that are in here and what it looks like. And again, I went in and extracted things like the ID, the published, the channel ID, the title, all of that stuff. So without getting too far into the details, and really too into the weeds, it really depends on the type of information you're looking for. I'm going to post my code that I used, minus the API key and the client secret and all that, on a Git repository. I'll link that below. So you can check out, if you're trying to do exactly what I did, you'll have the code there. You can kind of reverse engineer it and extract it there. But if you want to do anything else, you'll have to go through and read the documentation. If you want playlist data, you want to look at comments and things like that, you'll have to read through that and figure that out. I'm no expert in Python or APIs. I'm very new to it. This was one of my first times actually being able to extract that information on my own. So, a lot of what I did was just Googling and watching videos and kind of piecing it all together into something that kind of works. I'm pretty sure when I post my code, there's probably a lot more efficient ways to go through the code. I mean, I could probably spend time optimizing it, but I found a method, I found something that works, and I was happy with it. So, yeah. So let's break down the Python a bit, and the Python process and what that looks like here and what's happening in each of these steps. So there's a couple of different scripts happening, and that's because, again, like the data for the channels is in one API and the actual metrics are in another API. And so I had to kind of hodgepodge some of these things together using different API pools. And I had to also be conscious of there's limits to how many requests you can put in per day. So, you can put in 10,000 requests for the data API, and I think 100,000 requests for the analytics API. But most of what I'm doing is hitting the data API. So I have to be very cognizant of that. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that the method I went with could probably be improved. But yeah, so the first thing I need to do is, if you look at, let me look at here, just my analytics by channel. I'm importing all of my different libraries that I need. Some of them I don't need, but I just have them in there. And you can see I have all of my client secret and all of that here. But if you look at the actual requests, so this piece right here, starting at line 53, this was actually like a snippet of the sample code. And they actually have it to where when you download your client secrets, it has your client ID, your API key in this file. And so that's how it's trying to access the API. But the problem I found with that is when you run the flow just using the way that it comes from the sample, you have to manually go in, authenticate it, and make sure that you have to allow access every time you're on the Python script. And I wanted this to run automatically every day without me having to touch it. So I needed to do a couple things. I needed to add on some logic here that would go in and get that access code. So there's two different things here. There's the access token, and then there's the refresh token, right? So the access token is just for this specific session. this is the token that is going to authenticate this API request without me having to go in and say allow access. But I have to have a refresh token that is good for me to, it has a longer expiration date. That way I don't have to keep clicking that now. If your project has been verified by Google, then it never expires. But since mine is in a development project, then it expires once a week. So I do still have to go in and manually approve or allow access once a week, but then every other day it runs fine. And I have to do that because of the refresh token. So those were some of the things that I had to modify to get this to run every day. So again, the sample code that you pull straight from the YouTube documentation, it works, it hits the API, but you do have to click the button that says you're allowing it to access your channel. So yeah, so here, like I said, I've got all that information here, but this refresh token I have here is already expired. Now, getting the refresh token can be a little bit of a cumbersome process. Fortunately, I found this little bit of handy code that is going to go ahead and, using my client secret file, when I run this, it's going to allow me to get a new refresh token. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and run this. You can see it's running. And in my other window over here, it pulled up this, this is what I'm talking about. So pulled up this window, said this app hasn't been verified, so I have to allow this access. It's saying it wants to access my channel. I'm saying, okay. So now that it's been authenticated, you can see here that authentication was successful, right? So boom, but where's my refresh token? I don't see it. Well, that's because it stores in this nifty little credentials.storage. And so here, see, this is what I was talking about as far as the access code. So this access token is good for the next few minutes, but you know, I want it to run every day. And so what I need is this refresh token. And so I can take this refresh token and let me make sure I copy that right. Where to go? Okay, so I'm going to take this refresh token, copy that. So gently copy that. And I'm just going to come in and replace the refresh token here. Okay. I'm going to replace this one here. I'm going to replace this one here. Boom. So got that all taken care of. And so now what I'm going to do is, now that I've got that, now I can actually run my Python flows, or yeah, my Python scripts. So again, I've got 3 different ones. So what's going to happen with this one? This is going to, you know, in a very high level, first, this is going to go in and it's going to use my client ID and my client secret, as well as the refresh token I just got. And then it's going to hit this API and get me a new access token. Remember, the access token is what allows me to access it right now. The refresh token is what allows me to get my access token. And so it's going to use that refresh token along with my information and get me a new access token and store it in this function. Then once I have it, I can then use that down here. And this one is where I'm actually going in and accessing the analytics API. So you can see there's this YT-analytics version v2. And so here, now I'm accessing and calling that analytics API. Okay. Once I'm in, what I do is I create this data frame. So I need this because it's in JSON format. There's all kinds of nested values. I need to extract those values and I want to put them in a table with columns and rows. It's going to work and be easily manipulated, transformed, and put into Tableau. You know, I don't want to throw JSON into Tableau. And so I've created a couple of blank arrays here. One for my channel ID, my dates, and then my metrics here. So now that I've created those arrays, what's going to happen is here you can see I'm starting. This is a query. So this is a sample of a query that you would run with the analytics API. So I'm saying I'm going to run a query with that API, and I'm hitting my channel using the start date of my channel. So this is the date my channel I published my first video. And I'm saying every day from that start date to now, I want to pull these metrics, which are metrics that are stored in that API. And I want to pull that for every day. Okay. And so once it hits that, you can see that request. In that request, there is a nested parameter or a value, a key in the JSON file called rows. And so those rows, now that I have that, well, now I need to go in and extract every single one of those values from that JSON file, put it in a table format. And so here, that's what I'm doing. So for every single row that came out of and is stored in this response now, I'm saying, give me my channel ID, give me my list, and I'm storing each of those values. So for August 25th of 2021, I'm storing each of these values, the channel ID as well, and the date, and then each of those values I'm storing in this array or in this list. And then for the next row, storing them again, the next row, storing them again. So that's what this process is doing. I'm hitting the query for one day. Once that one day gives me a result, storing all of those values in here. And then the next day, storing all of those values in here again. Then I create a table and a data frame to say, I want my table to have these columns, right? And then I need to change those column values to specific data types, so that way when I actually pull it into Tableau Prep, it's the right values. But that's what's happening here. So when I stored those values in all of those lists, then that table, since I'm using those lists to create my table, it's filling in all of the rows in my table, okay? And I'm casting those types. And then down here, what I do is I save the file to CSV just to have it, sometimes I need to go in and double check, but really the key function is this get output schema down here. And that's going to enable me to use this in Tableau Prep later. So here, this is something that you have to include in your Python script if you want to be able to pull it into Tableau Prep. So you can see I've named each of my columns, and this I need to include what type I want it to be when it pulls into Tableau. So a prep string would be a string, prep int is integer. So whenever Tableau Prep loads this, then it's going to be a nice table with those columns and rows. And so if I go ahead and run this real quick, you can see it's running. It's gonna take a second because it's a lot of data to pull. And then that indicates to me that it ran. So if I come in here and open this CSV, actually, let me just open it. So you can see this is what it outputs. So I've got Rainbow CSV, the extension. And so you can see this column is these values. This column is these values. This column is these values. And so it put it into a nice, easy to read table, right? The video titles is a little different. So the video titles is looking at my channel ID, okay? And it's not even really using the API, like the traditional API to the documentation. It's really more just hitting this search API, taking my channel ID and all of that, and then it's doing it over and over and over again for every single video that's in that channel. So you can see here, I've got a list, an empty list for my video IDs. And then I'm saying for every URL, for every valid video ID in my channel, I've got to hit this, and then I've got to get into the interior of that JSON. Again, there's a bunch of nested values in the JSON. But I'm looping through and basically say, until there's no more links with video IDs in my channel, grab each of those URLs and basically just store the video ID at the end of it into this array. And then I create my data frame, access my API, and get my, once I've got, so up here, I'm just getting a list of the video IDs. That's all this piece up here is doing. I'm just getting my video IDs. And down here, what I'm doing is, now that I have my list of video IDs, I'm saying I need a list, because I'm going to take those video IDs and get the title, when it was published, and the description of the video. So for every value in my video ID list, I'm looping through that API, and getting those values and extracting them from the JSON. And then again, storing it in a CSV, and then using this to define what it's going to look like in prep. So if I run this, okay, and then let me open my video titles CSV. And so now you can see this is what it ends up giving me. So I've got video ID, title, publish date, and description. And so here's my ID, my video title, when it was published, and the description of that video. So again, really nice and clean format. And I made sure too that when it pulls in the description, that it leaves it exactly how it's formatted in the actual video description in YouTube. So really nice and convenient. Now, last one, the analytics by video. This one's the one that's going to be a little bit more complicated, because what I have to do again is I have to come in here, and again, the first thing I do is I come in here and hit this API and get all of the video IDs in a list. So I kind of talked about earlier, there's probably a way to optimize this, make it more efficient. I could probably combine the video IDs or the video titles and the analytics into one script, but I wanted to keep them separate specifically because of the way that I'm combining them in prep. So code purposes probably could be optimized, but for the way that I wanted to extract it all in prep, this is what ended up working for me best. So again, I use this function to get all of the video IDs, and I'm just storing a list of those video IDs. And then what I do here is I access or put in all the parameters to access my API. And then here, so I create a list, right? So I'm going to put a column basically for my video IDs, the date, the metrics. So here is where I got a little bit tripped up the first couple of times I tried to run this, because it looks similar to the channel Python script, but what's happening is it's taking that list of video IDs that I gathered at the top, and it's saying for each video, access the analytics API and pull every single day from the 25th of August in 2021 to today with all of these metrics. So once it's pulled all of that for one video, then it accesses the API again and pulls that same query. Because in the way they've set up how you can query the API, you can't query a list of videos at one time. You can only access one video at a time. So I have to keep looping through and keep hitting that API until every single video has all of the data extracted. And then the rest of this looks exactly the same as the channel one. I'm just taking it, appending it to those empty lists, putting those lists in the table, and then casting data types and hitting that and putting that into prep, or at least allowing prep to access this function to extract the data. So if I run this one, it's going to take a little bit longer than both the channel and the titles, because it's I've got something like 30 videos now, and it's a lot of days, a lot of metrics for it to pull. And so once this is done, it should take a little bit, and then we can check out the data that extracts. Okay, so that's done. Let's look at the data. There you go. So you can see for this video, here's all the metrics. A lot of blank views for that one. But then, so here's another thing. So it's pulling that date range for every video. I didn't want to try to get too fancy with it and look at the published date and all that. I just figured it's really not that much data. I think it's like 13,000 rows. So I can deal with, for the videos that hadn't been published yet, to just have blank values. And then once it actually did get published, like this one, there you can see all of those values start populating. So yeah, that is the Python scripts. And again, like I said, I will post those in GitHub so you can look at those and kind of pick them apart and reverse engineering. And if you've got your own YouTube channel, then if you just replace the key, the client ID, and your refresh token and all that, then you should theoretically be able to just get all of your metrics by channel per day, your videos, titles, and descriptions, and your metrics by video per day. And so like I said, this was more of just an overview on the Python, how it's really not to dissect, like here's how you type this out. Because again, I don't really know. I'm not a Python expert. A lot of this was pulled from copying and pasting from Google, looking and trying to find if it wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to do. Again, going through forums and videos and trying to get it to do what I wanted to do. So I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of inefficiencies in here, but it'll get the job done. So I'd be curious definitely to see what a more optimized version of this looks like. So again, I'll put it out there for you to check it out. And then in the next video, we'll take a look at how this runs into the prep flow and what the prep flow is doing, how it's combining the data and transforming it. Then ultimately what that outputs into a Tableau desktop. And then we'll just do a little quick overview in another video as far as how the dashboard itself was created. What did I do for the design, and what did I do to get the charts to work and things like that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be posting the next two parts here pretty soon, so keep an eye out for those, and I hope to see you in the next one.